Hello everyone, this is Kaf, and today we're going to be talking about what your project will be for Unit 3, and that is the username password generator. So now what we're going to do is when we run the program, we're going to first print out like a prompt saying welcome to the username password generator. You can do this here, right? And then we'll generate using an algorithm. So this is kind of like an introduction to algorithms. Using an algorithm, we'll generate a random username and a random password. We are of course going to be utilizing lists, but we're also going to be utilizing, of course, the random library. I'm going to touch in more depth exactly what the choice function does, and on top of that, I will also be giving you a precursor on loops, which is Unit 4, kind of give you an idea of how that can be used within a project here. So let's go ahead and let's get started on this project. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the prerequisites we have to do. First of all, we have to decide what libraries we want to use in a program. For example, in the random number generator game, we decided we want to use the random library, right? Here we're also going to be using the string library. You probably haven't used this before, but now it's going to come into play because we have to generate some random letters for our password. And so as you can see, we have randint, we have choice, and I'll go in depth into what that is, and then we have ASCII letters. If we print out ASCII letters right now, you should see that we just print out all lowercase and uppercase letters, so we can generate both of them, right? We can choose randomly whichever one in both of them, and then we print out this prompt right here. Okay, now we're gonna generate our username first. Okay, so here's a username algorithm, and this will look a bit complicated at first. I mean, this is a pretty big line of code, but if you break it down, it's actually very simple. The first thing we do is we want to initialize a list of adjectives, animals, and nouns, right? So I have some right here, and then basically what we're going to do is from each list, we're going to choose a random word from the list and then combine them together. For example, we might, one time when we run this program, we might choose fiery, scorpion, tamer. I spelled scorpion wrong, but you get the gist of it. Another time when you run this, we might choose demonic, killer, king. Something like that. And the way we do that is we use the choice function from random. Now, what exactly does choice do? You kind of saw this in our importing libraries video. It basically, given a list or a string, right? Remember that a string is in fact a list. You will generate a random index to choose from, right? For example, remember we have a list right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? So the index of 2 is actually 1, because remember, indices start at 1. The index of 4 would be 3, and so on. So what is actually happening in this choice method is that it generates a random index. The lower bound is of course 0, and the upper bound is whatever the length of the list is, -1. And the reason we do -1 is because, remember, we're doing this via indices. If you take a look at adjective list, it has 5 elements, strings within it. The length of the list is 5. But guess what? The maximum index is actually 4. Remember, because we start from 0 and we go to 4. That's why we do length of list -1. And so the choice method is just a faster way of doing things, right? And so what we do here is we generate a random word from adjective list, a random word from the animal list, and a random word from the noun list. And in order, we concatenate them together, right? We could use string formatting, but here it just makes more sense to just combine them together. And then finally, at the end, we append a random number. You see those numbers at the end of each username? We're going to just generate a random number from 100 to 999 and just append it. And so now if you were to print out this username, you would see we get a different username every single time. The password algorithm is a bit more complicated, and this is actually one of the most basic password algorithms. There are lots of really strong password algorithms out there that you can research, but I'm just going to show you a basic way of doing it. Okay, so here is the password algorithm, this right here. I also, at the bottom, I printed out, the final username and password. I formatted it. This is pretty much our complete program. Now, understanding this is pretty important because it's kind of a precursor to our next unit, which is loops. So let's go over this one by one. We initialize password to an empty string, okay? This is actually possible. You can initialize a variable with an empty string, and then we add onto the string every single time we loop through it, right? And so then we generate a random number, whatever the length of the password should be. It can be 8 characters or it can be 16 characters, right? And so depending on that length, for I in range length, basically we're going to loop over whatever this code from lines 24 to 29 is. We're going to loop over that length times. So if length was 8, we'll do this 8 times. If length was 12, we would do this 12 times. And this is kind of an introductory to loops and how they're very useful in doing repeated tasks over and over again. Okay? Now, for each loop, we again use the choice function and we randomly choose 2 strings, right? And these strings are basically choices. So we can either choose to do number or letter, right? And so I have a list of 2 strings, number and letter. They have a 50% chance, right? And so if it's a number, then we concatenate to the password, a random integer from 0 to 9. And of course, one thing you can do is you can actually use a compound operator, plus equals. This will also append it to the string, right? And then same thing here, where if it's not numbered, then of course it has to be a letter, and it'll generate, again, we're using the choice function, a random letter from that big ASCII letters that we saw at the beginning of this video, okay? And so we basically loop through this and we append we append letters until we get a nice password. And if you run this program, as you can see, it's going to generate a random username and password. Okay. Now this was a pretty simple video comparatively to a lot of our other projects. So I am going to give you a few challenges. The first challenge is somehow make it so that the user does not have to rerun the program, but instead within the program, you can continue to generate usernames and passwords as long as the user wants it to happen, right? So you keep on generating random usernames and passwords until the user says stop. You might not have the tools for that now, but maybe in the next unit you can come back to this one and patch this up. Another challenge I have for you is come up with different algorithms, right? So an algorithm is basically a methodology for doing things. That's a huge part in programming. And so I challenge you to come up with a different algorithm for generating a username. Maybe don't use exactly what I did. You can still use lists, but maybe do something different, right? And then for the passwords, there's a lot of things you can do different. Maybe you want to also add special characters in there. Maybe you want to make the passwords, less like random. Maybe you want to like concatenate random words together, but that word list is really long. Maybe you might even pull like some words from the internet, maybe a list of 100 words, and you just combine them randomly. I don't know. Just come up with new algorithms that are interesting and make sure to comment your code so we know exactly how your algorithm works. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video on it.